Hey guys, Walls here with a video breakdown of Act 1 of the tragedy of Julius Caesar. So, if you're working from home, get your handout ready or just kind of start taking notes. We're going to go over each question on the Act 1 handout while I've got Act 1 pulled up here. So, I'm going to call your attention to certain lines and kind of go over some of the important parts. Now, I love this play for one thing because this actually happened. Julius Caesar was a real person, and the events that Shakespeare describes here are kind of like fictionalized or embellished versions of history. Like Julius Caesar was the ruler of Rome, and he was betrayed by those closest to him. So we know what happened, and yet, we're going into this play, thinking, okay, well, we know like the guy in the title is dead. He gets killed. So what's this play actually about? Well, really, it's about Brutus. Brutus is kind of the main character. He's the protagonist, along with Cassius, and they end up going against Mark Antony and a couple other people later in the play. So really, it's a story of how Brutus is manipulated into doing this by himself. Brutus was, he was guilty of this, well, but also by Cassius. We're going to explore Cassius's role in creating this conspiracy, and we're going to see how Cassius and Brutus both wanted the same thing, but for wildly different reasons. All right, here we go. Now, line or number one: why are Morellus and Flavius unhappy about the celebration? Well, first, the celebration is Caesar has come home from war, but he didn't actually come home from war. Let's go to line 32 here. Morellus says, "Wherefore rejoice? What conquest brings he home? What tributaries follow him to Rome to grace in captive bonds his chariot wheels?" So, a triumph, when we say I am triumphant, it means I am victorious. But here, a triumph is an actual like thing. A triumph is when a Roman general won, conquered a country, conquered a land, and then came back with like stuff, like people to sell into slavery, or like to like the people he would like rulers would like capture people and say like, hey, other country, you want your people back? Pay up. But Caesar didn't come home with any of that stuff because he did not defeat a foreign rival. He defeated Pompey, who, according to our text notes, he ruled Rome up until 48 BC. So Morellus and Flavius are upset because they don't like Caesar because he defeated Pompey. They were fans of Pompey. Now he kind of calls out the common people here. He's basically saying, "You guys used to stay up and and just like hope to get any kind of glimpse you could of Pompey as he passed through the streets, and now Pompey's gone, and all of a sudden you're on the Julius Caesar bandwagon." All right. Number two, what warning does the soothsayer give? So scene two or scene one ends with Morellus and Flavius being like, "We don't like the Caesar character. Let's go around town and pull down all the stuff celebrating Caesar's victory." It'd be like if there was like it'd be like you'd go around town kicking over all of the political campaign signs of the candidate that you're against. That's what they decide to do. Now, scene two, Rome, a public place. Calpurnia is Caesar's wife here, and Caesar tells Calpurnia to stand directly in Antonio's way when he doth run his course. So this is the Feast of Lupercal. It's like a big celebration. Think of how the elementary school does the spring fling or like spring festival. There's this fun and games and all that kind of stuff, and then there's a race. There's the 5K. In this case, it's the same thing. There's this big celebration and there's a race, and the elders say that if the baron are touched in this holy chase by one of the racers, they will shake off their sterile curse. So Caesar is saying, "Hey man, my wife is barren, she's sterile, she can't have children, but if you are running this race and you happen to touch her, she'll be able to have children." Now, that sounds pretty superstitious to us, but this they believe this stuff. So Caesar needs an heir. Remember, this is he has to have someone to pass power down to. So he needs an heir. Antony says, "I shall remember it." When Caesar says, "Do this," it is performed. Right there, we see that Antony is loyal to Caesar, doesn't even question him, doesn't say anything like, "Man, that's weird." He just says, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." Okay. Now the soothsayer comes into play. Now this is like one of the most famous lines in all of drama. If you remember anything out of this, remember this line. The soothsayer says, "Beware the Ides of March." Oh, let's do it up here. And Caesar says, "What man is that?" Brutus says, "A soothsayer bids you beware the Ides of March." Caesar says, "Set him before me. Let me see his face." Again, beware the Ides of March. And Caesar says, he is a dreamer. Let us leave him. Pass. Basically saying this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, the soothsayer's role in this particular society was basically the same thing as the astrologer's role, based on that story we read a while ago, to tell the future, to be in tune with forces that other normal people aren't in tune with. So people take this kind of stuff seriously back then, but when the soothsayer says straight up, beware the Ides of March, meaning you're going to die on the Ides of March, Caesar says, no, you're crazy. So, and we're going to get into this when we get into the inferences part of the handout. But think about that. When when some belief or superstition benefits Caesar, he's all for it. Antony, touch my wife while you run past her, and she'll be able to have children. But when, in the same vein, when some superstitious belief works against Caesar, he's like, nah, this is crazy. So Caesar really kind of feels like as though he's invincible here. All right, let's get back to it. Number 3, why is Cassius upset? Okay, so Brutus and Cassius have a conversation here. And right here, Cassius is like, Brutus, you're not the same. Like something's off. Like you used to be all friendly towards me, and now you're acting weird. And Brutus basically says, I turn the trouble of my countenance merely upon myself. Vexed I am of late with passions of some difference, conceptions only proper to myself, which give some soil perhaps to my behaviors. But let not therefore my good friends be grieved, among which number Cassius be you one, nor construe any further my neglect than that poor Brutus, with himself at war, forgets the shows of love to other men. That is a very long and drawn out way of saying this. Brutus is like, dude, I'm struggling with some stuff right now, but it's my stuff, has nothing to do with you. So my bad. I'm sorry. But Cassius knows what Brutus is struggling with. Cassius knows that Brutus does not want Caesar to be king. He's worried that Caesar might be getting too much power. Now, Brutus's concern of Caesar getting more power is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, Brutus is an honorable dude. But Cassius is upset because Cassius doesn't like Caesar. He's jealous. Now let's figure this out. So, Cassius is flattering Brutus through here, saying like, "Hey, man, if only you saw you the way that others see you, you'd know how awesome you are. Here you go." Brutus says, "What means this shouting? I do fear the people choose Caesar for their king." Cassius says, "Aye, do you fear it? Then I must think you would not have it so." Brutus says, "I would not, Cassius. Yet I love him well. But wherefore do you hold me here so long? What is it that you would impart to me? If it ought be toward the general good, set honor in one eye and death in the other, and I will look upon both indifferently. For let the gods so speed me as I love the name of honor more than I fear death." So Brutus is saying, Cassius, what are you up to? Remember, whatever it is you want from me, I would rather die than be dishonorable. I'd rather die than act in any way that is less than honorable. So Cassius says, hey, dude, I know, Brutus, I know how you are. And he tells some stories here. Now, this is key. Cassius tells these stories where Caesar challenges Cassius to a race, and during in the ocean, and during the race, Caesar almost drowns, and Cassius has to save him. And then he also tells a story about how Caesar got sick. He just suffered from an illness and was very near death, and Cassius had to hold him and nurse him back to health. Now, I wanted to call your attention to line 135. Why, man, he doth bestride the narrow world like a colossus, and we petty men walk under his huge legs and peep out to find ourselves dishonorable graves. Men at some time are masters of their fates. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. Brutus and Caesar, what should be in that Caesar? Why should that name be sounded more than yours? So, first of all, there's a very, very popular John Green novel called The Fault in Our Stars. And this is where we get this. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. So, what Cassius is saying there is there's no heavenly or supernatural reason why we aren't as powerful as Caesar. It's on us. If we want to be as powerful as Caesar, we've got to make it happen. Now, right here, I wanted to call your attention to this because remember that poem we read associated with Of Mice and Men, the new Colossus. This is referencing again that the Colossus of Rhodes, a gigantic statue of the Greek god Apollo in the harbor of Rhodes, was said to be so tall that ships could sail through the legs. So there's just another reference to that. This idea of a Colossus being very important to the Greeks and Romans. And what Cassius is saying here is that Caesar thinks he is a Greek god, a Roman god. Okay, cool, cool, cool. All right, number 4. What has Caesar refused? How many times? We need to go to line 220. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, here's a key point. So Caesar right here and Antony are talking about Cassius, and Caesar is saying like, okay, I would fear Cassius if I was capable of fear, which I'm not. But if I was capable of fear, I would fear him because like the dude just sits around like thinking all day. He doesn't like music. He doesn't like plays. He's just always looking for ways to get more power, and that makes Caesar nervous. Caesar wants to surround himself with like happy fat dudes that don't care about anything else other than what's good for them. Okay, line 220. There we go. There was a crown offered him, and being offered him, he put it by with the back of his hand, and then the people fell a shouting. So Casca tells the story of Mark Antony offering Caesar the crown 3 times, and 3 times Caesar refuses it. Now, Shakespeare could count on, he produced these plays and set them up on stage at the Globe for like all members of society. You had everybody from, the working class, the working poor, to the elites, like going to check out these shows. But he could count on one book. If everyone in that whole theater was going to have read one book, it was probably the Bible, and or at least that's like the most literature they were familiar with. So I'm just, I guess we could Google this. I've just always assumed this was an allusion to um, Peter refusing Christ 3 times in the Bible. Uh, and so, Shakespeare throughout, I guess probably most of his plays, if not all of them, has these like callbacks or these allusions to biblical references. Okay, so you got to ask yourself though. Okay, well, let's talk about Casca's reaction. Casca basically thinks like, I can as well be hanged as tell the manner of it. It was mere foolery. I did not mark it. He wasn't paying attention to it. He thinks Caesar is just doing this as like political theater. And this gets us to the reading strategy part of our handout, making inferences about characters. So Julius Caesar refuses the crown 3 times, but Julius Caesar wants that crown. So you got to think to yourself, why would Julius Caesar refuse the crown 3 times? Who's offering him the crown? Mark Antony is offering him the crown. Mark Antony is a politician. But the people are like clamoring, like, Caesar, please take the crown. Caesar knows that he needs to get his authority from the people, not the ruling class. Because he knows that if he gets his authority from the people, they'll follow him anywhere. The ruling class would basically just have to go along with it if enough people support him. Okay. For number 2 and number 8, Casca and Cicero, they're against Caesar. We can figure that about their. Oh, let's go to the handout here. We know that they're against Caesar. That's kind of as deep as their characters get, really. Now, for Mark Antony, we can infer that he is loyal to Caesar, that he is ride or die with Julius Caesar. Now, for Brutus, number 4, we can infer that Brutus is an honorable man. He really is a good person, and I think Shakespeare wants us to see that Brutus is a good person, but there's something off with Brutus. There's a tragic flaw. There's a character flaw in Brutus that's going to cause him to go down a very dark path. All right, for Cassius, we can infer that he is jealous of Caesar. I use the word petty. He doesn't really seem to have a good reason to be against Caesar. It's almost like he just doesn't like the guy. He thinks that Caesar thinks too highly of himself. Whereas Brutus is worried that Caesar might gain too much power. Cassius is just like, I don't like you, Caesar. Okay. For Calpurnia, we can infer that she's loyal to Caesar. She wants to be a good wife. And with the soothsayer, we can infer that he knows when Caesar's going to die. All right, for number 9, scene 3, lines 15 through 32. Let's go down here. So these are the lines that he's talking about, or the handout's talking about. And in this thing, like, Casca basically points out that he sees a bunch of really weird stuff. And we can infer that Casca thinks that the gods have been angered. He sees these things as omens. In class, I told the story of like one day when I was in high school, Lucky Charms were my favorite cereal. And I poured a bowl of Lucky Charms, and there were no marshmallows in the bowl. It was all just like the paper tasting like oat thingies. And I looked in the bag, like the box, and there was marshmallows in there. But for somehow, when I poured that bowl, it was just all oat things. And I said to myself, man, This is a bad sign. So think about that. Like, do we talk like that now? Like, do we see signs? Do we see omens in things, in occurrences? Now, Cicero comes and says, "Yeah, dude, times are strange, but men construe things after their fashion, clean from the purpose of the things themselves. Comes Caesar to the capital tomorrow." So basically, Cicero kind of puts some perspective on it. He's like, yeah, these are weird times, but sometimes we see A and we assume B, but these things are really not related at all. So it could just be weird stuff going on. All right, that takes us through Act One. So the key things for Act One: we establish why Cassius wants Caesar gone. We establish that Brutus may also want Caesar gone, but Brutus wants to make sure that he's doing the right thing. And we establish that Caesar wants power. He's going to come to power, but he's going to come to power with the support of the people. All right, guys, check out the next video for Act Two.